1985, a janitor at a factory in Canada spent his nights making people laugh at local comedy clubs. 10 years later, he became the first actor in history to make $20 million for a single movie. This is the story of how Jim Carrey turned imagination into reality and proved that sometimes the craziest dreams are the ones that come true. Today, his movies have made billions, and his name is known in every household, but back then, he was just another dreamer with empty pockets and a full heart. The difference? While others hoped for success, Jim Carrey decided to make success inevitable. Born in Newmarket, Ontario, young Jim learned early that life doesn't play favorites. His father was a musician who gave up his passion for a safe accounting job, only to lose that job when Jim was 12. It was a lesson Jim never forgot. "I learned you can fail at what you don't want, so you might as well take a chance doing what you love." The Carrey family went from middle-class comfort to cleaning floors at the Titan Wheels factory, living in a VW van, and later setting up camp on his sister's lawn. But it was during these hardest times that Jim discovered his superpower, the ability to turn pain into laughter. While working nights as a janitor, teenage Jim would practice his routines, using comedy to lift his family's spirits after long shifts. He wasn't just telling jokes, he was learning that imagination could transform any situation. At 15, wearing a polyester suit and tap shoes, Jim stepped onto the stage at Yuck Yuck's Comedy Club in Toronto. The crowd's response? Complete silence. But where most would see failure, Jim saw a challenge. He didn't need the audience's belief. He had enough belief for everyone in the room. Every night after his janitor shift, Jim would stand in his backyard, looking up at the stars, and picture himself as the biggest star in Hollywood. This wasn't just daydreaming, it was training. He treated his imagination like a muscle, strengthening it with each passing day. He developed a routine that seemed crazy to others but made perfect sense to him. Every morning, he'd write himself notes predicting his future success, stick them on his mirror, and read them out loud like they were breaking news headlines. By 17, he was making waves in Toronto's comedy scene with his wild impressions and fearless physical comedy. But being Canada's funniest janitor wasn't enough. Jim had a vision that was bigger than any comedy club could hold. While mopping floors, he'd picture himself walking red carpets. While riding the bus, he'd practice Oscar speeches. When he finally made it to Los Angeles, reality hit hard. The city of dreams wasn't exactly rolling out the red carpet. Jim found himself living out of his beat-up Toyota Camry, parking in the hills of Mulholland Drive each night. But even then, he turned his situation into fuel for his vision. He'd sit on the hood of his car, looking out over the city lights, and transform his car into a temporary visualization chamber. Every morning, he'd wake up in his car, head to a nearby gas station to freshen up, and start his daily ritual. He'd write affirmations on napkins. "I, James Eugene Carrey, will be the biggest star in Hollywood." He'd stick Post-it notes all over his car's dashboard. "Next year at this time, I'll be making $10,000 a night." He didn't just write these things. He felt them, lived them, believed them with every fiber of his being. The Comedy Store became his nightly home, even when he wasn't performing. He'd watch the greats, study their timing, and volunteer to go on at 2 a.m. when the crowd was down to 3 drunk people and a janitor. Other comedians thought he was desperate. He knew he was practicing. Every empty room was Madison Square Garden in his mind. It was during these early LA days that he developed his most powerful visualization technique. Before going to sleep in his car, he'd act out specific scenes from movies he hadn't made yet. He'd perform acceptance speeches into his rearview mirror. He'd practice interviews where he discussed his meteoric rise to fame. To passing cars, he might have looked crazy, talking to himself in a beat-up Toyota. To Jim, he was rehearsing his future. The real game changer came when he wrote that famous check to himself. $10 million for acting services rendered, dated Thanksgiving 1995. But what most people don't know is that this wasn't just a one-time thing. Jim wrote himself a check every single morning, each one labeled "for acting services rendered," each one for a different amount. He'd visualize depositing them, spending them, earning them. The $10 million check was just the one that stuck, the one that felt right. This check wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a contract with the universe. Jim carried it everywhere, through countless rejections and empty audition rooms, through pilots that never took off and shows that got canceled. The check got worn and creased, but his vision never did. Working the comedy circuit, he caught Rodney Dangerfield's eye and started opening for him. But Hollywood wasn't rolling out the red carpet yet. Jim kept pushing, kept believing. In his tiny apartment, he would visualize in vivid detail the movie sets, the directors calling his name, the audiences laughing. He didn't just imagine success, he rehearsed it like an Olympic athlete preparing for gold. "You can't just visualize and go eat a sandwich," he'd later tell aspiring dreamers. "You have to act as if it's already real." So he did. He walked into every audition as if he was already a star. He performed every club set as if he was selling out arenas. He lived his future before it arrived. Then came 1994, the year the universe started catching up to Jim's vision. In just 12 months, something unprecedented happened in Hollywood history. Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, made for a modest $15 million, exploded at the box office, bringing in over $100 million and introducing the world to a completely new style of comedy. Critics called him too wild, too much. Audiences couldn't get enough. Just months later, The Mask transformed him from breakthrough star to bona fide box office powerhouse. The film's groundbreaking special effects, combined with Jim's elastic performance style, created something Hollywood had never seen before. Another $350 million at the box office proved Jim's vision of stardom wasn't just a dream, it was prophecy. Then came Dumb and Dumber, where Jim's $7 million salary seemed huge at the time. The film's $250 million worldwide gross made that salary look like a bargain. 3 different characters, 3 massive hits, one undeniable truth. Jim Carrey wasn't just having a moment. He was revolutionizing comedy. But the real magic moment? Thanksgiving 1995. The same date written on that now tattered check. Jim signed a deal for the cable guy that would make him the highest paid actor in Hollywood. $20 million. Double what he'd visualized. The check in his wallet wasn't just a dream anymore. It was a receipt for services rendered to his own unwavering belief. This isn't just a story about manifesting money. That $10 million check was never about the money. It was about daring to believe in something so completely that the universe had no choice but to make it real. "Our intention is everything," Jim would later explain. "Nothing happens on this planet without it." The janitor from Canada hadn't just become a movie star, he had proven that reality bends to belief. While cleaning those factory floors, he was already a star in his mind. While performing in empty clubs, he was already selling out theaters in his imagination. While sleeping in a van, he was already living in mansions in his dreams. His story rewrites what we think is possible. We're taught that seeing is believing, but Jim Carrey proved that believing is seeing. He didn't wait for evidence to believe in himself. His belief created the evidence. The manifestation didn't stop with that first check. Jim kept pushing boundaries, taking roles that scared him. The Truman Show, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Man on the Moon. Each one was proof that dreams don't have limits unless we give them limits. Today, Jim Carrey's journey has evolved beyond Hollywood. He's become a painter, a philosopher, and a teacher of dreams. But he's never forgotten the power of that first visualization, the moment he dared to write himself a check that seemed impossible. His story teaches us that manifestation isn't magic. It's a commitment. It's about having the courage to define your future and the persistence to make it real. That worn-out check didn't just represent money. It represented the moment a young man decided to bet on himself when no one else would. Looking back at those nights on Mulholland Drive, there's something we can all learn about the power of vision. Jim Carrey didn't just imagine his success. He lived it in his mind until reality had no choice but to catch up. He showed us that sometimes the craziest dreams are the ones most worth believing in. In a world that often tells us to be realistic, to lower our expectations, to settle for less, Jim Carrey stands as proof that dreaming big isn't just an option, it's a strategy. After all, as he proved, sometimes the most unrealistic thing you can do is put limits on what's possible. The next time you find yourself looking out at a city full of lights or staring up at the stars from your own backyard, remember the janitor who became a legend. Remember that right now, somewhere, another dreamer is writing their own check to the universe. If you found inspiration in Jim Carrey's incredible journey from factory floors to Hollywood heights, remember to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below.